Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, All Sace. I hurt my hand recently, so I can't really do the whole clappy thing like I normally do. As most of you guys probably already know, when I talk about anything on my channel, it normally has to do with just an episode instead of like an entire series, you know? And I typically get a lot of slack for that because oftentimes I'm asked how I can critique an entire series based off of just like the first episode. And if I could clarify something here, I don't really consider my videos like reviews, even though I do put that in the title sometimes. To be honest with you, I think of them more as like high production reaction videos. Not saying that my videos have like a really high production value, it's just that reaction videos are literally the easiest thing in the world to make. But it doesn't change the fact that I oftentimes am asked to review an entire 50-something episode season of a show. And in all honesty, that sounds painful. If I had to do that every week, I would probably just not do that. I already struggle having to watch a 30-minute episode of something a week. Do you really think I could handle that times 50? But as you can obviously tell by the title, I recently finished Ninja Sentai Kakuranger, and I figured that it wouldn't be too much of a pain to like review this, considering that I just finished the entire season during my free time. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't expect this all of the time, but whenever I finish a season of something, and whenever I have something to say about it, I might upload a video giving you my thoughts on it. This video will be like super in-depth compared to my normal videos because it is a review, and I'll be operating under the assumption that you've seen or at least are familiar with Ninja Sentai Kakuranger. I'm not gonna spoil the entire series, but we're gonna be analyzing a lot of it, so I guess you've been warned. The main thing I want to focus on in this video is the way in which Kakuranger chooses to establish the team and how the series flips the sort of classic Sentai formula on its head and makes the decision to separate that team midway through the series. A decision that in all honesty is not talked about enough. I mean, really think about how focused the Super Sentai series is on like the team aspect, the team dynamic. Think about how integral that is to the identity of the show. And this series makes the conscious decision to strip that away for a solid like 10% of its run. To fully understand the importance of this arc, we first need to look at like how this season establishes the team dynamic up to this point. Ninja Sentai Kakuranger is interesting in that it chooses to introduce the team throughout a course of several episodes rather than all at once in the first episode. Now, there's nothing revolutionary about constructing the team in this fashion. Like, there are plenty of other seasons that have done the exact same sort of thing, such as Jetman or like Kyoryuger, for instance. And personally, I prefer this sort of slow burn method when it comes to like introducing the cast. It allows for every member of the team to like stand out more and have like their own solid introduction, which gives way for a more interesting team dynamic overall because everyone else is so fleshed out. Introducing the entire cast in one episode makes it really difficult for everyone to stand out on their own from the beginning. What separates a good Sentai from a bad Sentai is how good the characters are. Sentai doesn't have a giant overarching narrative with like mystery and tons of like character development and stuff, and not saying it needs that. What Sentai does is it uses its large cast to its advantage and has them carry the interest for the viewer. If the characters are interesting, the show is interesting. That's all it really needs. What makes Kakuranger especially interesting is how slowly introducing the team in this fashion causes the first 10 to 15 episodes to be hyper-focused on how that team is constructed and how their relationships are established through doing that. A specific moment in the series that really nails in this idea is episode 16, titled The Red Monkey Oni Extension. This and episode 15 see the introduction of the Flower Konoichi Gang, an all-female evil Sentai team. And I would like to point out that not only are they the first all-female Sentai team, but they are also the first evil Sentai team, and they stay evil throughout the entire series. Not to say that there would be no Nezai Rangers without them, but it's an important detail to draw attention to, I feel like. Anyways, episode 15 sees the Kunoichi gang tricking the Kakurangers into a forest where they're able to split them apart and take them out one by one. They capture the entire team, excluding for the Red Ranger Sasuke, and in episode 16, Sasuke is able to save his teammates using his wit and like natural intuition. Keep that in note for like later in this video, because it's kind of really important for Sasuke's character. Episode 16 ends with the Kakurangers being reunited, joining each other for like their typical sort of Sentai roll call. This episode sort of establishes that the Kakurangers are at their best when they work as a unit. This, along with the previous 15 episodes, establishes that this team can face any task as long as they trust in each other and work together to take down the threat. Over the course of those 15 episodes, we see 5 people who know little to nothing about each other go from like complete strangers to like the closest of friends. This episode cements the fact that they are the Ninja Sentai, almost. This is like the accumulation of every episode before it. It displays how far the team has come from when they first met, and how them working together is sort of like what makes them so powerful. That's where like their real strength comes from, is their team dynamic. So in a way, this show sort of establishes that team dynamic, sort of team element better than any Sentai before it. This is because we're able to see that progression. We're able to see them get introduced to one another. This makes it all the more painful when we see the team being forced to split up in episode 24. Episodes 23 and 24 are both phenomenal episodes in how 23 opens during Tsuruhime's birthday, where the team reminisces on how close they've become over the past 22 episodes. This leads to Tsuruhime, the team's leader, giving everyone friendship bracelets symbolizing their unity. Over the course of this two-parter, we see the yokais are planning a ritual in order to summon their leader, Daimao, and the only way for the Kakurangers to stop them is for them to retrieve the 5 hidden scrolls from the resting places. The issue is that they only have a month to do so, and there's no way for them to find all of them within that time without having to split up. Episode 24 ends with the 5 Rangers relaying their insecurities to one another as they split off. Each of them here is visibly frightened by the idea of having to work separately in order to stop the yokai's plan. This leads to one of the most emotional scenes I've ever seen out of Sentai, really. We watch a compilation of the team's memories with one another as the sun sets in the background, and I had to rewatch this episode for this video, and I literally lost it when Sekai thought to himself, "I'm not confident, but I'll do my best." And then it made it even worse when Jiraiya said, "See you again, my friends." I know that's just kind of some trigger words I'm throwing at you, but I promise you, watching the show, once you get to this point, it sounds genuine. It feels real. It makes sense for these characters to feel the way they do. And that sort of translates to the viewer in how just emotional it becomes. Again, remember, the entire first half of the show is focused on introducing the team to one another and like watching them build their relationship. I cannot stress enough how well executed the lead up to the Hidden Scrolls arc really is. The next portion of the video is going to be focused on the actual Hidden Scrolls arc, the whole like 5 episodes really, and how they relate in context to the whole season. And we're also going to sort of recap my thoughts on each of the characters individually, considering how each of the 5 episodes focuses on a different character, sort of. The first episode we see the Red Ranger Sasuke being guided to his hidden scroll by a butterfly who was turned into a human by the Beast General in order to help him find it. I promise you it makes more sense in context of the show. I know it sounds crazy out loud. Unfortunately, the butterfly perishes at the end of the episode due to an encounter with the yokai. Her final words to Sasuke tell him to protect not just humans, but all innocent creatures. Everyone often disagrees as to whether or not Sasuke or Tsuruhime are the team's leaders. What this episode does is it sort of cements Sasuke's role on the team. He's sort of like their metaphorical big brother. Throughout the series, we see Sasuke save the entire team from almost dying on like countless occasions. This includes episode 16, which I just mentioned earlier, as well as episode 4, 44 and 50, where we see this exact type of situation occur in almost all of these episodes. The entire team is captured, and Sasuke is the only one who is able to save them. Personally, I feel as though Tsuruhime is a team leader, and Sasuke is more like their kind of like protector. I don't know if that makes sense, or if that sounds corny. He's the one who's like skilled enough and who has the natural intuition to sort of save the day when necessary. And that is partially because of the fact that, of course, he's the Red Ranger. He has to. But it never gets to the point where the entire team sort of like praises him. Sasuke's role on the team and in life is to watch over those who aren't skilled enough to protect themselves, really. Next up, we have the White Ranger Tsuruhime's episode. And this is great because not only does it tell a story that relates to developing her character, but it also gives greater context to her backstory. Tsuruhime is introduced in the latter half of episode 1, and she honestly kind of shows up without any real explanation as to like who she is or why she's there, which is odd because, as I said earlier, everyone else on the team gets like this sort of grandiose introduction, but that's okay because her episode, along with the entire second half of the season, is focused entirely on her character and her backstory. In this episode, Tsuruhime is tasked with the challenge of guiding 4 fake Kakuranger dolls to find her hidden scroll. She's told that as the leader, she must be okay with sacrificing those dolls along with her teammates in order to accomplish the task. Throughout the episode, we see each of the fake dolls sacrifice themselves for Tsuruhime, but in the end, she's unable to like grab the scroll due to her guilty conscience. We then see her go back and save each of the dolls before retrieving the scroll. And that was the actual trial intended for her all along. It was testing Tsuruhime's compassion for her teammates and seeing how she would react to the idea of letting them sacrifice themselves for her. Tsuruhime, for all intents and purposes, is the team's Red Ranger. She takes on that role in all aspects except for actually wearing the color red. She's the team's leader as well as the focus for the majority of the plot. I know people talk about Time Pink a lot, but Tsuruhime really is like the first female Sentai leader. And she's also just one of the strongest written characters in the show's entire history. No, I said characters, not female characters. She's one of the greatest characters ever written. And I don't want to spoil everything that happens with her family or her backstory, really. But that, along with this episode, along with her overall just being like a strong female lead for a Sentai, just makes her one of my favorite characters in the entire franchise. She alone makes the entire show worth watching, IMO. The next episode sees the Yellow Ranger Sekai and the Blue Ranger Saizo working together to find their scrolls. Now, at first, I was really disappointed about the fact that they didn't split these two up, but I'd much rather have these guys share an episode if that means Jiraiya, the Black Ranger, gets a two-parter. It's worth it. Saizo and Sekai really are just comic relief characters, so if I had to choose any 2 Rangers on the team to sort of put together like this, it would be these 2. The episode sees the 2 of them being turned into Kappa by a yokai, and the only way for them to turn back into humans is for one of them to kill the other. What's interesting about this episode is that even though it may seem like it's filler, it does sort of draw attention to this like dichotomy that the series sets for these 2 characters. Saizo's whole shtick is that he's like the unluckiest man in the world. Every single one of his focus episodes sees him losing something or having something bad happen to him. We see him losing money, his car, his dignity, his face even at one point. Saizo, for all intents and purposes, is a loser. He's used to losing things. In fact, the entire series started because he and Sasuke were tricked into breaking the seal, keeping all of the yokais from entering the real world. And in this episode, he risks losing what's most important to him, and that's his humanity. And I felt not as corny writing that down as I feel saying it out loud. And Sekai, on the other hand, is selfish. Sekai skips training practice, and all he seems to care about is women and food. And all of his focus episodes seem to confirm that fact. So what's interesting here is that you have 2 comic relief characters paired up with one another. One who demands that everything in life goes his way, and another who's used to nothing working out the way he wants it to. And so when you see them paired up together, First of all, of course it would make sense that Sekai would be the one to crack, but it's also interesting to see Sekai get over his selfish ways and to see Saizo not giving up in the face of defeat, and to see them communicating that with each other and working through the process together. These are probably two of the weakest characters in the entire show, but this episode does a great job at refining details we already knew about them and making them better characters in spite of how one-dimensional they may seem. The last 2 episodes of this arc focus on Jiraiya and his time in America before moving to Japan to join the team. In this episode, we see Jiraiya's backstory about his dead dad and his martial arts teacher who trained him in place of his father. In this episode, we see Jiraiya's actor display just how much he is physically capable of. I'm pretty sure he did a lot of his own stunts here, and the fight choreography is just absolutely spectacular. The 2-parter is great for literally just that alone, but it's also great for giving context to Jiraiya's backstory and why he's so childish, if that makes sense. The first episode we're introduced to Jiraiya, we see him running around dressed like a cowboy on roller skates. Now, admittedly, that's the reason why I love Jiraiya to begin with. That's the reason he's my favorite character on the team. The whole American cowboy thing, along with him just dropping perfect English randomly, just makes him so likable for me. He's just goofy and it's dope. But what we find out in this episode is that Jiraiya sort of had to grow up early in life. He lost his dad at a young age and was forced to train under his master in order to prepare himself to be a Kakuranger, and that strongly affected his outlook on life. That's the main reason he acts so immature throughout the entire series. I mean, just look at his focus episodes. Jiraiya sees him watching too much TV and playing dodgeball with the local kids. He's a child. He acts like a literal child, and it's adorable, and it's just funny. It's just funny. And there are so many instances of just him goofing off and doing silly stuff outside of that. What we see in Jiraiya throughout the course of this season is the refusal to grow up. And this episode does a good job explaining why that is the case. It's because of the fact that he had to grow up at such a young age due to the circumstances in his life. And as someone who has a bookshelf full of toys and a YouTube channel where he talks about the Power Rangers, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that I can kind of relate to that, sort of. Jiraiya is my favorite character in all of Super Sentai. Now, I know that's a really bold claim, considering the fact that I literally just said that Tsuruhime is the best character in the show. Now, that's true. Tsuruhime is probably the most well-written character. But for me, I just personally think there's a lot to enjoy about Jiraiya. From his refusal to grow up, to his relatable backstory, to his whole American English-speaking shtick, to his actor doing his own stunts, to literally just everything about him, just him being so goofy in general. I fell in love with him because he's goofy as hell, and I fell even harder after finding out the fact that he has such a deep and personal backstory. He and Tsuruhime are 2 of the most well-written characters in the entire franchise, to be honest with you. That sort of concludes the whole Hidden Scrolls arc of the show, and most everything I kind of wanted to say in this video. I do have a few minor things I want to bring up, starting with Ninja Man. Now, I know that 6 Rangers weren't really a thing yet in the show's history, as before Kakuranger there were only 2 of them, so we weren't really entirely sure if this was a trend or if this was a thing to really expect at the point when the show was made. But what I love about Ninja Man is how he's so different from every other 6th Ranger up to this point, to the degree that they don't even really classify him as a 6th Ranger anymore. It's crazy how this is the 3rd or 4th Sentai season to have an additional hero like this, and how Ninja Man was created to shake up a trend that wasn't even really a thing yet at this point. The second thing I wanted to bring up is the general aesthetic of the show. I love how even though the ranger suits are simplistic, you're still able to tell that they're ninjas. I also just love the civilian outfits. They look very 90s urban street youth looking. They really nail down how young this team is in comparison to previous ones. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was the intro. There's a specific line that I really like that honestly makes me really emotional every time I hear it. In the evening with that girl, I finally feel good. At that moment, signs and winds come up. We jump up as it slithers into the space between us. A person vanishes into a black hole. I feel like the imagery here is really powerful, to me at least. Just sort of think about it. It's the middle of the night, and you're finally alone with that girl. You know, the one you've been thinking about in algebra class all morning. It really summons that sort of youthful energy that's really present throughout the entire show. A person comes along and vanishes, having you both taken aback, unable to sort of comprehend the situation. Now that could be a lot of things, and maybe it is just supposed to be a ninja, and I'm probably reading too much into it. But what if that vanishing person that sort of leaves you both breathless is representative of something? Interpret it as you may, but it could be a lot of things. It could represent how fragile any given moment is and how it can't last forever. It could represent how fast people grow up and how that causes our lives to just change due to that. Anything sort of like that is my favorite way to sort of read it, and it really sort of gives you a good idea of what I think Kakuranger attempts to teach the audience, and that's to really appreciate those moments. Appreciate your childhood and the memories you make growing up. Appreciate your friends and the times you have with them and the ability to hang out and just be kids. Each of your friends and those memories are unique in their own way, and they're special to you as an individual. They mean something, right? Even though they're kind of just whatever. And always remember your friends and those memories and how they sort of shape you into the person that you are right now. And sometimes situations and circumstances come along that cause you to have to split up from one another, meaning that you can't hang out like you used to or spend as much time as you like. But that's okay, because even though you are separated, you're still friends. Nothing's changed, it's just you all have your own priorities. You all have things that you need to work on for yourselves. And what's great about that fact is that when you do get to see them again, you'll all be better, stronger, more well-rounded individuals because of that. Because you were able to spend so much time alone and doing your own thing. Which in turn makes those moments you have together all the more valuable, because they're so few and far between. And that's why I think Ninja Sentai Kakuranger really is the best 90s Sentai.